On our 10th anniversary, my boyfriend secretly set up this huge wedding for my best friend who's fighting cancer. Her last wish was to marry him, and he went with it, without even letting me know. Rey Hall blocked every bit of news about it, telling everyone to keep their mouths shut around me, but my best friend actually live-streamed the whole thing for me to watch. That night, I cried so hard I passed out. After they got married, Rey stuck around with her on the island. Then one day when my heart started acting up bad, he rushed off to take her to the hospital instead, leaving me behind. I almost died because of it. Feeling crushed, I said yes when Nathan Foster popped the question. He's kind of a big deal in Seattle's fancy circles. Chapter 1. He kept checking in. Trina Barton, you're really gonna marry me, right? Like every few minutes he'd text to make sure. Once I said yes, he bombarded me with photos of at least a dozen diamond rings, each one more jaw-dropping than the last. These are rings I snagged at auctions. Like any of them. When I didn't answer right away, he texted again super quick. If none of these catch your eye, there's a jewelry auction happening in the UK soon. I'll fly you over there to pick one yourself. After looking through all the rings carefully, I sent Nathan a voice message. That graph pink diamond looks gorgeous. Let's go with that for our wedding ring. Right then, Rey showed up behind me. He caught the words wedding ring, and for once, his usually cool face looked totally thrown off. Wedding ring? What wedding ring? He asked, staring at me so intensely it was almost scary. I looked back at him like I couldn't care less, ready to make up some excuse. But just then, my phone rang. It was Elena Turner, my best friend. I picked up, and she was crying on the other end. Trina, is Rey with you? I just had another nosebleed. I'm freaking out. Before I could even answer, Rey grabbed my phone. Elena, don't worry, I'm coming right now, he promised, sounding super urgent. Then, without saying a single word to me, he just took off. I stood there, completely forgotten, watching him run to another woman. That's when I remembered he'd asked me to go on a night cruise with him on the Pearl River tonight, his way of making up for missing our 10th anniversary. So this is what it feels like to finally let go of someone. Watching him run after her, my heart didn't even skip a beat, like it just couldn't feel anything anymore. My phone rang again. This time it was Nathan. Trina, you ready? I'll come get you in Boston tomorrow. Looking off into nowhere, I said quietly, give me a week to wrap things up here. Then I'll head back to Seattle, and we can get married. His voice was super warm when he answered. Sure thing, I'll be waiting. If anything comes up that you can't handle, just remember, I've got your back. After hanging up, I called Grandpa Hall to say goodbye. He and my grandfather were war buddies and super close. When I was 8, doctors told me I had a serious heart problem. Luckily, the Hall family owned this fancy private hospital that specialized in heart stuff, so my grandfather sent me to stay with them in Boston for treatment. Since then, Rey's parents have treated me like their own kid, and Grandpa Hall has always looked out for me like crazy. As I got ready to head back to Seattle, it just felt right to say goodbye properly. Rey didn't come home that night at all. A message from Elena popped up on my phone. Look at you with cake all over your face. So cute. She attached a pic of Rey leaning down to bite some cake, with her smearing frosting on his cheek. Like a minute later, she deleted it. Sorry, Trina, I sent that to the wrong person, she wrote again. Rey thought it was adorable and asked me to send it to him. You're not mad, right? I didn't bother replying. Instead, I went to my room and just started packing my stuff without making a fuss. The next day around noon, Rey finally showed up, carrying some gift he'd brought to say sorry. Trina, Elena got really bad last night. I just took her to the hospital, he said, watching my face closely. I didn't say anything as I opened the velvet box he handed me. Inside was this fancy Van Cleef & Arpels watch with diamonds all around the strap, super pretty and obviously expensive. But then I remembered he'd given Elena something similar before. Mine was just the pricier version. When he noticed I wasn't saying anything, Rey asked, sounding a little worried, Trina, are you upset? I answered super calmly, no. Elena's sick. You should be with her. He gave me this weird look, like something felt off about my answer, but eventually just let out a sigh. I'm glad you're not mad, he said. I mean, we have our whole lives ahead of us together. But Elena, his eyes got all watery. I was so done with this conversation. Then, by all means, go spend more time with her. I turned to leave, but he grabbed my wrist, stopping me dead in my tracks. When I looked up, my face was completely blank, eyes empty. What? I asked flatly. Ray looked kinda irritated, though he didn't seem to know why. Before he could say anything else, his phone went off again. He checked the screen, then glanced back at me. Trina, I've got to go on a business trip for a few days. I won't be around for a bit. Take care, I replied casually, thinking his absence would make it way easier for me to visit the halls and say my goodbyes. The next morning, I grabbed all the gifts I'd prepared and headed over to the Hall family home. When Mrs. Hall heard I was heading back to Seattle, she looked super worried. Trina, what's going on? You've been doing so well here in Boston. Why are you suddenly leaving? Mr. Hall, meanwhile, slammed his fist on the table. And where the hell is Ray? Why didn't he come with you? Did he do something to hurt you? I hesitated, but just couldn't bring myself to spill everything. No, nothing like that. It's just that I've been away from home forever. I want to go back and reconnect with my roots. Mrs. Hall gave me this concerned look. Does Ray know you're planning to leave? To keep things drama-free, I nodded. Yeah, he knows. With that, everyone seemed to get that they couldn't talk me out of it. After chatting a bit more, I got up to leave. Right then, the front door swung open, and there stood Ray, with Elena right beside him, looking all calm and confident. Trina, fancy seeing you here, she said with this smug smile, like she already belonged in the Hall family. I held her gaze, keeping my voice steady. I don't owe you an explanation for why I'm here. With that, I pushed past Ray and headed for the door. Realizing I was about to bolt, Ray chased after me, sounding desperate. Trina, you've got it all wrong. I only brought Elena here so my parents could help find her a good doctor. He paused like he was trying to make me see reason. She's your best friend too, remember? You're not mad, are you? I stopped for a hot second, his words fading as memories came flooding back, his promise to me under that cherry tree when he was 18. He'd said marrying me was his lifelong dream. He once swore he'd bring me home to meet his parents as his future wife. But here he was, introducing another woman to his family, while telling me he was on some business trip. Seeing Ray watching me anxiously, I answered calmly. Why would I care? I've never been the type to hold grudges. People who aren't worth it don't deserve my energy. Ray looked thrown off. Trina, do you seriously not care at all? God, he was impossible. When he and Elena were getting cozy before, he called me petty for being upset. Now that I'm choosing to ignore it, he's still not happy. I didn't see any point in explaining myself. Without another word, he leaned down and gave me a quick peck on the forehead. Be good and wait for me at home, he said quietly. As the elevator doors closed, I wiped my forehead. That kiss made me feel gross. On our 10th anniversary, Ray had also ditched me with some lame excuse about a business trip. That night, I got a video call request from Elena. When I answered, I could hear the sounds of a wedding celebration in the background, and it slowly hit me. The wedding was Ray and Elena's. 3 months ago, Elena had posted on social media about her terminal diagnosis with a caption that said, "Before I die, I want a wedding with the person I love most." At the time, I hadn't thought anything was off between us, and even commented asking who this special person was. She just replied, "You'll find out when the time comes." Finding out the truth felt like someone stabbed me in the chest. I could barely breathe through the pain. I frantically called Ray's number, again and again, desperate to understand why he'd done this to me. But that whole night, he didn't pick up once. I cried until I passed out, while he was off enjoying his wedding night with Elena. Thank God it would all be over soon. Later, after I'd gotten back home, Elena called. Trina, I'm really sorry. I honestly didn't expect to run into you today. I just let out this bitter laugh and didn't say a word. Elena took a deep breath, sounding super jealous. Mrs. Hall is amazing. She was so sweet and caring to me, she said. They even promised they'd do whatever it takes to find the right doctor for me. She paused, then lowered her voice. Trina, Why couldn't it be me marrying into the Hall family? It could be her for all I cared, if she could make it happen. Well, congrats on your marriage in advance, I said coldly before hanging up, so tempted to just block her number completely. Maybe that would stop her from reaching out just to rub her new place in my life in my face. But as I was about to do it, I accidentally opened her social media and discovered something that made my blood boil. She had stolen my design draft and submitted it for a competition. The same design I'd created as a birthday gift for Rey. My hands were shaking with rage. He must have given it to her behind my back. Trying to calm my racing heart, I took a deep breath, grabbed my copyright certificate, and filed a plagiarism report against Elena's entry on the competition website. After dealing with that mess, my friend Selena, who co-owns the studio with me, called. "Trina, what's going on? Why are you suddenly pulling out your investment?" she asked. Selena had always been friends with both Elena and me, but she and Elena never really clicked. I decided to tell her everything, including my plans to get married. When Selena heard, she was absolutely furious. This Elena is unbelievable, using her illness as an excuse to steal someone else's man. She's probably faking it, she added. I'm so mad. I'm calling her later to give her a piece of my mind. I felt touched by how angry she was for me, but I just sighed. Forget it. It's not worth it. The wedding's happening soon, and I just want to move on. Right then, I heard footsteps coming up behind me. Rey's voice suddenly cut through the air. Wedding? What wedding? His words hit me like a slap, and I couldn't help but laugh at how ridiculous they sounded. Rey, do you even believe that yourself? I asked, shocked. You ran out of here without thinking twice, not caring that I might end up in the hospital, almost dying from a heart attack at home. Rey's eyes went wide, his body stiffening as he trembled. Trina, what did you just say? I was completely drained, with zero desire to keep this conversation going. Rey, I said quietly, my voice firm. We are done. Chapter 5. Rey's face darkened, anger taking over. His eyes locked on me, and in just seconds, his look changed from guilty to stubborn. He sneered, his voice dripping with attitude. It doesn't matter. Even if you're married, it changes nothing. If I have to, I'll drag you back to the Civil Affairs Bureau and force you to divorce him. Then he pulled out a blank check from his pocket and tossed it at Nathan. Ever heard of the Hall family? Rey spat, eyes full of hate. Fill in whatever amount you want and divorce my wife. Otherwise, you'll wish you never messed with me. I was so mad at Rey's arrogant, disrespectful behavior, ready to explode, but Nathan stopped me with a calm hand gesture. Rey, is this your big plan to win back your girl? He asked, sounding casual but totally mocking him. Not very impressive, I've got to say. Those words hit Rey like a slap. His face turned bright red with rage as he yelled back. None of your business, he snapped. Do you even know who Trina and I are? We've been childhood sweethearts, together for 10 years. You think you can just steal her from me? As long as I keep her close, day after day, she'll be mine again. She'll come back to me. Rey suddenly raised his fist toward Nathan, eyes wild with fury. I gasped, crying out, Rey, you've lost it. But just as his punch came down, Nathan blocked it effortlessly. His expression turned ice cold as he stared at Rey with pure disgust. Tie Trina back. Nathan's voice was freezing. What do you think she is? Some object you can control and toss aside whenever you feel like it. Despite Rey's years of hardcore physical training, his muscular build and strength, he was no match for Nathan. In a flash, Nathan had him pinned like he was handling a child, making him completely powerless. Nathan's lips curled into a smirk. With just a nod, the bodyguards in the room jumped into action, quickly tying Rey up with thick ropes. Rey thrashed around, veins popping out of his neck. Asshole, do you have any idea who I am? Rey shouted, fighting against the ropes. How dare you treat me like this? Nathan calmly adjusted his cuffs and then spoke slowly, like he was talking to a child. You're from a Hall family in Boston, right? He paused, his eyes hardening. Why don't you go back and ask the old man of your family if he's ever heard of the Foster family in New York? With those chilling words, Nathan raised his hand, and Ray was carried away by a group of bodyguards, his eyes wide with shock. Nathan didn't even bother looking at him again as the room cleared out, tension thick in the air. The Hall family in Boston might be living large, but Nathan's power and connections were way beyond what Ray could even imagine. The Foster family in New York had massive businesses all over the country, and their wealth made the Hall family look like small potatoes. After everything calmed down, Nathan turned to me, looking serious but slightly worried. "Trina, don't get me wrong, I'm not usually like this," he said, his voice softening. Looking into his eyes, I smiled gently. "I think you handled it perfectly fine. If it had been up to Ray, he never would have backed down. But I was so done with all the drama. I just needed it to end." That evening, Nathan organized a dinner party, inviting the older folks from both our families to nail down the wedding details. This was also my first time meeting Nathan's mom. As I sat there waiting, I felt super nervous, my palms getting all sweaty. Nathan squeezed my hand under the table, whispering, "Trina, don't worry. My parents already love you." When both families arrived, the vibe was surprisingly warm. When Nathan's mom saw me for the first time, her face lit up with this huge smile. She reached into her bag and pulled out this fancy brocade box, handing it to me. "Trina, I've heard so much about you from Nathan," she said, her eyes sparkling. "I'm so happy to finally meet you in person. You're even prettier than I imagined." I was totally caught off guard by Nathan's words. I first met him at an art exhibition. He was showing his work, and I was the curator. We clicked right away, having these great conversations. Just 2 months later, we'd already decided to get married. I couldn't help wondering, did he really talk about me that much with his family? Seeing me lost in thought, Nathan gently nudged me. "Go ahead, open the box and see what's inside." I figured it might be some kind of welcome gift, maybe a watch or a designer bag. But when I opened the box, my mom, sitting next to me, gasped. "Isn't this the Foster family's ancestral jade bracelet?" she blurted out. Inside was this imperial green ice jade bracelet with this deep, rich color that seemed to glow. I remembered reading about it in some financial magazine, where it was valued in the 9-figure range, a crazy expensive family heirloom. Feeling totally awkward, I quickly tried to hand the box back. "This is way too expensive." But Mrs. Foster just smiled warmly, gently taking the bracelet and slipping it onto my wrist. "This is for my future daughter-in-law," she said, sounding kind but firm. "No matter the cost, it's not too much." She gently covered my hand with hers and added softly, "You deserve it." Chapter 6. That day, when I followed my parents home, I was surprised to find Uncle Steve and Aunt Lena waiting for us. My mom sighed and spoke quietly. "When your grandfather insisted on sending you to Boston, the Hall family promised to look after you. We all thought you and Ray would end up together forever. We don't know what happened between you two, but the Hall family has been good to you for so many years, and it's hard to just walk away from that." Her words made sense, so I reassured her. "Don't worry, Mom. I've got this." I grabbed 2 cups of tea and went into the study to talk with Uncle Steve and Aunt Lena. When Aunt Lena saw me, her eyes were red. "Trina, I heard you went back to Seattle to get married." I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "Uncle Steve, Aunt Lena, I'm not gonna lie to you. It's over between Ray and me." Uncle Steve's face darkened as he frowned. "Did that punk do something to hurt you? I'll beat him to a pulp." His anger was obvious, but I stayed quiet, not sure what to say. Aunt Lena, though, picked up on something. "Is it because of Elena?" I didn't say anything, but my silence said it all. My mom looked down, seeming ashamed. "Trina, we love you like our own daughter. I don't even know how to face you after what Ray did. She's always been so loving and supportive, especially during all those years I spent away from home. I refuse to let Ray's actions mess up our relationship. Aunt Lena, no matter what, you're the person I respect the most." I knew deep down they came hoping to convince me to change my mind, but after hearing the whole story, I stayed firm in my decision. I didn't try to make them stay longer. Once they left, Selena bombarded me with messages. "Trina, check out these screenshots I sent you. That Elena is seriously insane. After finding out about your marriage, she went on this crazy rant to all her friends, saying all kinds of nasty stuff about you. It's driving me nuts. I opened the screenshots and felt my blood boil. The harsh, bitter words were clear as day. Some people act like innocent little white flowers, but before they even break up with their boyfriends, they're already rushing to marry someone else. How cheap. The post even had an old photo of me, and the venom behind those words hit harder than I expected. Plus, she'd replied in the comments, "You don't know, her husband is old and ugly. She just wants his money." Selena was fuming in her messages. This Elena is so low. I got so mad I had a huge fight with her and blocked her right away. I was trying to focus on the excitement of my upcoming wedding, so I didn't want someone like Elena ruining my mood. I quickly told Selena, "Don't let it get to you. I'll be married in 3 days, and I can't wait for you to be my bridesmaid in New York." During this time, Nathan took me shopping and sightseeing, saying it was a way for us to bond and connect better. Even though I tried to distance myself from certain people and drama, gossip about Elena still reached me through various friends. After Ray's parents got back to Boston, the first thing they did was head to the hospital to grab Elena's medical records. At first, it seemed random, but once they looked through the documents, I was shocked by what they found. Ray's dad noticed that Elena's test results looked off, showing signs they'd been messed with. Curious, they followed the clues and started their own investigation. In the end, they discovered Elena didn't have any terminal illness at all. She was completely healthy. She'd been fainting and complaining about feeling sick, but it turned out she was just pretending to get Ray's attention and sympathy. When Ray's mom found out, she ordered the security guards to throw Elena out of the hospital along with all her stuff. Elena, terrified, cried out loudly and clung desperately to the hospital doorframe, refusing to leave. "Aunt Lena, please don't throw me out. Don't kick me out. If Ray finds out about this, he'll definitely fight with you." Ray's mom was furious. She slapped Elena hard across the face and snapped, "How dare you mention Ray? Get out now. You're wasting medical resources by being here." After getting kicked out, Elena sat in the hospital courtyard, crying as she called Ray. 5 minutes later, Ray showed up at the hospital. At first, Elena thought he was coming to support her, eager to complain. But to her surprise, Ray's face was dark with anger. Without a word, he grabbed her by the hair and yanked her head back. "What did you just say?" he demanded. "You're not sick at all. You've just been faking it to trick me." Elena was so scared she didn't dare cry out loud. Instead, she moved her lips, begging desperately. "Ray, I did it because I love you too much. And don't you love me too? You always say that Trina is too perfect, that you feel pressured when you're with her. It's different with me. You can relax and be happy when you're with me." But before she could finish, Ray slammed her to the floor. "Who do you think you are? Do you really think you can compare to Trina? 10 of you aren't even worth one of her fingers." Chapter 7. Elena managed a bitter smile at his words. "Ray, why don't you just admit it? You've fallen for me," she said. "If you didn't care, then why would you go out of your way to protect me, help me, and even stand up for me?" Ray looked at her, cold and unflinching, and finally gave her the harsh truth. "I looked out for you because Trina asked me to. She wanted me to be there for you as her close friend. I did it to make her feel better." He paused, his voice firm. "Without Trina in the picture, do you honestly think I'd even look your way?" Elena's face twisted in shock and disbelief, and she shook her head wildly. Her voice rose to a piercing scream right in the middle of the street. Once she calmed down, her tone turned coldly triumphant. "So, what if you say you love her now? Too late for that. On the day you married me, I was live streaming the whole wedding to Trina. You have no idea how many times she called, or how she felt hearing what went down that night." Her words hung in the air, taunting him with the mess she'd created. After losing me, Ray completely lost it. He dragged Elena into his car, floored the gas pedal, and recklessly sped toward the river. "If I can't have Trina, then we'll go down together," he shouted, voice full of despair. Elena, terrified, screamed as the car swerved dangerously. When traffic cops finally managed to stop Rey's car, she collapsed in pure relief. 3 days later, just a day before my wedding, my phone rang. Rey's voice on the other end was rough, almost unrecognizable. Hearing him say my name again, Trina, felt weird, like hearing an echo from a past life. "Can I come to your wedding?" Rey asked over the phone, his voice tense. "If I can't be the one marrying you, I want to see it with my own eyes." Before I could answer, Nathan, who had somehow appeared behind me, took the phone from my hand and answered instead. "Of course, Rey. You're more than welcome," he said smoothly. "In fact, I'll make sure to personally toast to you." On the other end, Rey's voice bristled with anger. "Hand the phone back to Trina. This has nothing to do with you." Nathan's eyes sparkled with a hint of mischief. "Actually, as her husband, it has everything to do with me," he replied calmly. With an angry grunt, Rey hung up. Nathan returned my phone, the tension in his body easing as he looked at me with warm concern. "You're not mad at me for jumping in, are you?" he asked, sounding unusually nervous. I laughed softly, feeling relieved. "Not at all. You handled it perfectly. You saved me from a lot of stress." He seemed to relax, though his eyes still looked a bit worried. "I'm glad to hear that. I was worried I might have crossed a line." I looked at him, touched but also hesitant. "But are you really sure about letting Rey attend? I know him. He's not one to give up easily. What if he tries to mess up the wedding?" Nathan shook his head, totally unconcerned. "Don't worry, Trina. With me there, he won't get the chance." Nathan was never one to back down. I'd seen his strength and determination firsthand. But in this moment, he was gentle, patient, willing to protect my peace of mind. Moved, I stepped forward and hugged him. I could feel him tense up slightly before relaxing into the hug, his arms wrapping around me with quiet reassurance. "Thank you, Nathan," I murmured, my voice full of gratitude. "Thank you for standing by me, for giving me dignity when I needed it most." His hand gently stroked my hair, his voice warm and sincere. "Trina, between us, there's no need for thanks." On the wedding day, the venue was packed with guests. In the hotel dressing room, I couldn't shake my nerves. Nathan popped in several times, each time bringing me milk tea and snacks, which made Selena laugh. "Oh, the groom is determined to spoil his bride," she teased, grinning. "At this rate, he'll feed you until you can barely fit down the aisle." Nathan just chuckled, his gaze tender. "Today's a big day. You'll need your energy," he said, encouraging me to eat. The venue was decorated with vibrant flame orchids, each petal adding to the warmth of the celebration. When it was time, I emerged wearing this gorgeous veil, and beautiful music filled the air. My parents, teary-eyed, walked me down the aisle. It was only a minute-long walk from the entrance to the center of the venue, but the journey, from a past of heartache to finally finding the right person, felt like a lifetime. As I reached the altar, Nathan's eyes were full of love and total devotion. He knelt down, holding out a dazzling ring. "Trina, will you marry me?" Feeling overwhelmed with emotion, I covered my mouth and nodded. We exchanged rings and sealed the moment with a kiss, our hearts becoming one. Nathan had arranged for our wedding video to play nonstop on a huge billboard in downtown Seattle. "I want everyone to see your happiness and share in it," he had said, his only wish to celebrate our love openly. As the party continued, I realized Rey, who had said he'd attend, was nowhere to be found. Chapter 8. As the last guests left, I finally spotted Rey in the corner, held down by 2 bodyguards. His hands and feet were tied up, with a cloth stuffed in his mouth so he couldn't make any noise. Nathan walked over and calmly pulled out the gag. Rey's eyes flashed with anger. "Is this how you treat your guests?" Totally unbothered, Nathan replied coolly, "Sorry, Mr. Hall, if our hospitality wasn't up to your standards." Rey turned to me, his face softening with a hint of desperation. "Trina," I met his gaze calmly and said, "Thanks for coming, Mr. Hall. Make sure to send us an invitation to your own wedding. We'll show up as a couple." At the word couple, Nathan's expression warmed a bit, a slight smile appearing on his lips. Ray clenched his jaw, glaring at Nathan. You planned this whole thing, he accused, his voice bitter. You wanted me here to watch her marry you, to crush any hope I had left. You're just a calculating jerk. Nathan didn't even try to deny it. He just smirked and replied with a touch of smugness. Thanks for the compliment. Ray, not used to dealing with someone like Nathan, was too pissed off to respond. In the end, he just slumped to the ground, defeated. Trina, he whispered, do you know how much I prepared for this? I swore I'd win you back today. But when I saw you walking toward him, looking so happy, it felt like swallowing glass. I could barely breathe. I looked at him, completely unmoved. Oh, that's normal, I replied. I felt exactly the same when I heard you and Elena had your wedding. With that, the light in Ray's eyes completely died out. Nathan's plan had worked. Ray finally got that it was over. From that moment on, our lives were headed in totally different directions. Later, on our wedding night, I sat on the bed, feeling super nervous as I listened to the water running in the bathroom. The sound wrapped around me, filling the room with anticipation. A few moments later, Nathan stepped out, surrounded by steam, showing off his toned body, his chest still wet. I swallowed hard, almost in awe. Nathan came closer, leaning in to whisper in my ear, like what you see? That night, I experienced pure happiness, and it felt like the perfect beginning to our life together. The next morning, I woke up sore and hoarse, my voice barely above a whisper. Still, I had to pull myself together because Nathan and I were hitting up his friend's fancy party that evening. I picked out this champagne-colored strapless dress, and when I walked in on Nathan's arm, you could feel the excitement buzz through the room. After getting me settled, Nathan went to say hi to his friends. The person closest to him there was Mr. Alan Reeves, the second son of the Reeves family, known for their antiques business. As soon as he spotted me, Mr. Reeves came over with this big grin. So, you're the famous Miss Trina, the one our young Master Foster can't shut up about, he teased. I smiled back politely. Mr. Reeves, it's great to meet you. I've heard a lot about you. Alan chuckled, raising his glass. You don't know the half of it. Since he first met you as a kid, he's been talking about you nonstop. When you became a painter, he went out of his way to support your shows and even bought all your paintings. You could say he's been quietly obsessed with you for years. Someone nearby jumped in. That's not all. He opened a branch in Boston just to be near you. Listening to them, everything suddenly clicked. All those times Nathan seemed to show up exactly when I needed him, even appearing to take me to the hospital when I had that heart attack. It wasn't just random chance. Our story hadn't just started recently. It had begun years ago, back in childhood, in ways I was only just figuring out. Chapter 9. When Nathan came back, he noticed me deep in thought and asked, "What's on your mind? You look like you're a million miles away." I turned to him with a smile. I was just wondering, how did we meet as kids? I can't remember it at all. Nathan wrapped his arm around my waist, leaning in with a playful smile. Well, he started. Many years ago, there was this little crybaby who would always sit under the cherry tree and bawl her eyes out. I laughed, vaguely remembering, as he continued. I was upstairs practicing piano, and your crying was so loud it kept throwing me off. Eventually, I came downstairs. That's when I met you. The memories suddenly rushed back to me. Wait, you were that big brother who would come and comfort me? I remembered it so clearly now, how I used to cry under that cherry tree, because my health problems made me feel left out by my friends. Then this nice, older boy showed up, listened to all my problems, and even hung around to chat. I'd bring him little snacks and flowers, and somehow, those tiny moments became really special to me. Oh my God, Nathan, to think you're that same boy, I said, taking in his handsome face. You've really grown up. Nathan laughed softly at my surprise and reached out to gently mess up my hair, his touch warm and familiar.